All right, welcome to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm excited to have another episode here for you guys. I have a wonderful guest. She's a very special, unique, and just all-out great woman and what she does. And I can go all day on my time and knowing her and seeing some of the work that she's done for my state of Michigan and so forth. But without further ado, I'll have her introduce herself.
Thank you, Michael. That is so generous of you and so kind. I appreciate your words. My name is Kathleen Hoehne, and I am the foster care consultant for the Michigan Department of Ed. So it is my role to work with every school district or local education agency across the state of Michigan. And currently, right now in March of 2022, we have 893 school districts or local education agencies across the state of Michigan.
Wow. That is a huge number, and like my brain is already circling with questions and so forth. But I'm gonna go to my first question because I asked this question a lot and I formulated differently. But what led you to what you do now? What was that pathway and that journey like?
So when first of all, my education background was always in pre-med and biology. And so way back in the late 1990s, when I decided to become an actual teacher, my first job landed me in an adjudicated setting. So I went to school to work with kids who were in a county juvenile home. And that program, whether the students were identified as special education or students with a disability, the program itself was a special ed program. And so for the next 10 years, I worked specifically with kids who had disabilities. And I got my first master's degree in teaching students with learning disabilities, and then went on to complete I had one practicum to complete my second master's degree in education leadership. And I kept thinking as I was a teacher and looking for support from administrators that I wasn't getting what I needed. And that meant I wasn't able to give the students what they needed, which is what led me to continue my education and rack up that student debt like we all have, right? So I left the classroom and moved into consulting positions to support and advocate for kids who needed extra help. From there, I moved on to a job with the Department of Ed in the Michigan Department of Education in the Office of Special Education. And what I learned at the state level was that there was such a crossover with kids who had disabilities and kids who had special needs and our different subgroups, of which foster care is one. In fact, with the recent data that we've collected, there's about a 35% dual membership, which means a student with a disability may also be experiencing foster care. So in 2017, the department, because of the Every Student Succeeds Act, was required to hire a point of contact and a state coordinator to work with all of the local education agencies across the state. We've already identified that there are almost 900 of them. And I applied for that job. It felt really aligned to all of the work that I had been doing and all of the efforts that I had put into my own personal education. And it also aligned with the belief system and, the core values that I hold in helping make sure that children receive the support that they need. So I was the first person, and I am still the first and only person at the department who does this work as the state coordinator on behalf of kids experiencing foster care.
Wow, wow. Well, first, because my own experience and so forth, I want to say thank you for what you do.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And so forth. I believe there's a time where I probably came up to you in passing about a couple questions, and so forth, and you connected me in the right direction. But almost 900. So that's a lot. That is a lot. So, how do you do it all? Like what does that look like? And how does that translate to those schools? And I'm pretty sure once you got into this position, because it's fairly new and having a person to contact about these different things, there was kind of like a reform period that had to happen. So what did that look like?
So that's a great question. As I think back when I first stepped into the role, and I guess before I answer that, what I want to say is you've mentioned already, and I've mentioned the 900 school districts that we have here in Michigan. I'd like to say in Tennessee, I think there are 125 districts. In Nevada, there are, I think, 14 school districts. So each state across the nation and each territory like Guam and, the Virgin Islands and such are required to have a person at the state level or at the state agency level to do the work who is separate from the McKinney-Vento grant coordinator. What I want to say is that the work that I'm doing now, the foster care used to fall under the umbrella of McKinney-Vento, and we do know that there's crossover there also. So the work was sort of being addressed, but not with intention, because whenever there's federal legislation that comes along, it changes the scope and it changes the state's requirements. So what I did when I first started is I had a plan, which is something that, I live my life by as much as I can, always knowing that there should be some built-in flexibility because we never know what's coming, right? We never know if there's going to be a pandemic or a tsunami. We don't know. So I stepped in with a basic plan that followed the basic tenets of what the Every Student Succeeds Act said. It said every school district who accepts Title I funds or federal dollars has to have a person named and identified and available to answer questions and be accountable and available to the state. So that was my first mission, was to make sure that every school district understood what their responsibility was. The next piece of that was making sure that the systems that our state agency has were in alignment with what the law said and what was already in place. So it required several tweaks along with messaging to the school districts. Now, I want to point out, we haven't talked about kids yet at all, have we? We've just been talking about what systems there are. And so it's important to me, and that's something that I promised myself when I took state positions, is that I would never lose sight of children, of children's faces, and their burdens, the challenges and the burdens that are carried into those classrooms every single day. So, thinking at a state level requires a lot of organization and structure. But I make sure to personally stay connected to people so that, and children, not just people, not just adults, but children specifically, because in my mind, without that voice, the work that I'm doing doesn't mean anything but words on paper. And I mean, you and I have a personal relationship. We know one another. You know that if you ask me a question, if I can't answer it, I'm going to find somebody who can help us figure out what next steps need to happen. So
Definitely.
it's kind of a roundabout answer to your question.
Definitely. And wow, it's like, there's so many questions just circling around. But I have a question that I wanted to ask, because you kind of segued into that, to the youth, and so forth. So in what you do that encompass schools that are a part of residential facilities that are in Pacific districts? And if that does, what for the audience and for myself, what is the difference in would you say education styling versus just a regular public school?
That's a really interesting question, Michael. And the truth is, when we're talking about a CCI, or a child caring institution, that is typically a residential type setting. And not all of the children that are assigned to a residential or a child caring institute are foster care. Some of them are adjudicated outside of the foster care system. Some students are placed privately by their parent or a mental health facility. So it's interesting, and I think, don't hold me to this number, but I've been in several conversations lately with the Supreme Court of Michigan Child Welfare Division, along with the Juvenile Justice Court Improvement Process. I've been appointed to those task forces, and we've been trying to really parcel out and understand who is responsible and who is providing educational services to children and youth who are placed into these child caring institutions. Many of those facilities contract with K-12 Inc. or other, sometimes it's the local education agency who provides those services. Sometimes they contract out. Oftentimes they use a virtual platform. And those are, I say that, and I want to use these very hated air quotes, because we know that when a child is placed in front of a computer, there's a great deal missing. And when we're talking about vulnerable youth and children already who have potentially been separated from a family structure, they really need those personal connections in order to, really rehumanize and retouch and retrust and reinvent and, reimagine what tomorrow might look like for them. So virtual options are the easiest, but I won't say the best. But I would say that most of the child caring institutes, many of them, at least the majority, offer a virtual platform. And I'm just going to segue into that can cause trouble for those youth then who transition back to a brick and mortar building or to a youth home or a different placement that might be in a family home, and then transition back to a traditional brick and mortar school. So there are a lot of pieces to that question.
Definitely. And piece of my story to tell you, because it's really dear to me why I asked this question. I entered into the child welfare system on the juvenile side as a JJ. Eventually became a ward of the state, and then a dual ward, and then became full-on foster care. So if you can imagine, I have done school in CCIs on the juvenile side specifically, and in just juvenile facilities, you know, and each one of those, you know, they have a person that sits in a classroom, but most of the work is on a computer. And even, you know, in my experience going to work for these different facilities as a youth care worker, or, you know, in the cases of juveniles, semi-correctional, you know, officer, you know, I've experienced it's a form of kind of special education teaching.
Yes.
And it's hard to transition out of that when they're placed in a foster home, or if they have the option when they get into another CCI to go to school in the public. You know, I know in my own case, it was extremely difficult, and almost all of my credits did not transfer.
Right.
You know, so, and that made me frustrated. And, you know, and I know for many other people that I work with and mentor, you know, almost, you know, set them backwards and their, you know, process of healing, because they're like, dang, you know, so I've been in this place, it had to deal with all this. And then, you know, on top of, you know, that, I was close to graduating. Now you telling me I got to go back 3 grades because I don't have a credit. So that's in my experience. That's why I asked those questions. You know, and I don't know if you may have an answer, but how, you know, is there any work towards trying to make that better for the individual youth?
There's a lot of work towards making it better. And I'm using those words carefully. I want to go all the way back to my introduction and state my first teaching job was in a juvenile correction facility. And that's where, honestly, because I wasn't sure, I had no intention of, you know, this path. This path came to me and kind of discovered, you know, it was a self-discovery for myself. I really stuck with the pre-med and the biology with ideas in Kathleen's mind about potentially, you know, teaching college level, maybe going to med school and becoming a doctor myself. But when I walked into the juvenile home setting and I was teaching, my heart left my body. I felt absolutely head over heels in love with every single student that walked through the door. If I get emotional, you're just going to have to love me through it. I'm telling you. But I remember I was so careful as a brand new teacher to align the curriculum that I was offering. Of course, it was science, and of course there was reading, and I had other things that I had to support because they, you know, you only had like 4 teachers to teach everything. And you're talking about students age 8 to like 19. And then if they're still in the juvenile facility, they're really moving to more of an adult setting if they need to continue in their service. But I just remember telling my kids, because I still believed it at the time, that every credit that they earned in my classroom was going to follow them. Because that's what I had been told as an adult and as a professional. And I believed it. And so, I mean, my kids were working hard. They came to class ready. I mean, they were amazing. Those years in that facility were some of my very favorite teaching. Because I had full attention. They were motivated, they were hungry, and they trusted me. So I wasn't a computer. I was a human, and I had young children of my own at that point. I had babies, really. But what I have since learned is, and kids who came back, because recidivism is quite high, when you're in a system that doesn't support your needs, it's really hard to exit, isn't it? I mean, you know that from personal experience. It's just it's a cycle. And so recidivism was roughly 87% for those kids. And they went back to homeschool, and they came back angry with me because their credits did not follow them. And, I did everything I could at that point and found I was powerless to make that change. At this point in my career at the state level, what I can say is, sadly, in Michigan, there are 0 credit protections, 0 credit protections for students in high school experiencing foster care, homelessness, or migration, or any vulnerable, highly mobile student population. If they start in school A and they have so many credits and move to school B or school C or school D, those credits are not necessarily going with them. In fact, every school district in the state of Michigan can add their own unique graduation criteria on top of the Michigan Merit Curriculum Basic 18 credits. Now, with that said, I want to really give a shout out to Grand Rapids Public Schools, because for the second year in a row, they have taken away all of their additional credits, and they're saying any youth who has the basic minimum 18 Michigan Merit Curriculum credits are graduating. And I'm like, this is the answer. But without legislation or the will to do it, school districts don't have to. In Michigan, we are a local control state, and every one of those 893 school districts can choose their own graduation criteria on top of the 18 Michigan Merit Curriculum credits. Now, Michael, I know that you have, I think you shared with me, and I'm just going to say a high number of high schools. I know the number, you know the number, but I'm not going to say it because it's your number. But almost 24 high schools that you attended before final. Yeah.
It was over 21 different high schools, and that's not counting middle schools and so forth. Because I when I entered the juvenile system, I entered, still finishing up middle school and stuff like that. So yeah.
So it is, I am in conversation, and I have not given up the fight. I got my torch lit right behind me here, and any chance I get, I share what can be done, what should be done, and what must be done to change our outcome data. This is not about adults. It's about helping youth achieve the first step towards independence, which is the high school diploma. There are at least a dozen states across the United States that have high school and credit protection in legislation. That is not something that Michigan has.
And that shocks me, because I'll be honest, I'm a big person. When we thinking about federal and state, we want to be able to have our own opinion. We want, but also in cases where you think things, and not to get too political, are bipartisan, where, okay, if I go do this time and work hard, that should count. I feel like that's a bipartisan thought, and this has been happening for years, because I experienced this, and I've been out of that bracket of education. What is it? Not post-secondary, but I don't know, high school, middle school.
Secondary. Secondary.
Yeah. Secondary, education. I've been out of that for almost 6-7 years. So it's crazy for me to think that it's still happening, because I have clients where I mentor and stuff like that, and they're coming to me like, hey, I'm getting ready to move another foster home, I just want to make sure I can stay at the same school, because every time I move schools, I have to go backwards, and that's and it's concerning, because now we have a generation of foster youth who are valuing education. They're like, this is my only way out. Even if my foster home suck, even if I got to endure crazy situations, if I keep going, I can get a sports scholarship for most of them. I can do this. I can just get my way out to go to another state, or, be my own person. But we're getting further and further from that goal, because even though they're embarking on that, it's only so much patience, it's almost so much will and motivation if
Totally.
you keep getting kicked down.
Yes. So that is one of the goals that I have before I retire. And I'm not talking about retirement, like soon. I'm talking about, at least 4 or 5 years from now. But that is one of the goals that I hope to achieve, is to influence not just discussion, because just, you can talk and talk and talk, but gosh, without that action, there's nothing, there's no meat there. It doesn't mean anything. So, that is one of the shortcomings of the system that we have. And that is one of the things that I talk about all the time, about unintended consequences. In our minds, we think, this will be great. This will be awesome. We'll make it a special, unique thing to our district, and our diploma is going to mean something. And really, it only means something to those people who get out with the paper, right? So the people, or the youth who are stuck in a system where they have no power, I can't imagine how that must feel. So that is one piece of like what continues to drive my motivation to get up and to keep doing the work and to keep doing the training. We have some changes that we need to make, not only on the education side, but potentially on the DHHS side also. With the numbers of childcare foster workers that we have, and that number that turns over every year. We have like 3,500 foster care workers across the state of Michigan. That's a rough number. Don't quote me on that, but that's just to give you an idea. And roughly a third of those folks change and transition out of those jobs every year. So that means that you've got brand new folks with feet on the ground who are trying to, or supposed to be working with school districts to collaborate around what to do. That training, I mentioned earlier when you and I were prepping that Ann Rossi and I were doing a training, and we had 200 people show up, which is a good number of folks. But we did a poll to find out what they knew about high school credits. And it was pretty shocking to come away and understand that more than 80% of the people attending thought those credits transferred with the students. And, so that gives you information about the lack of understanding across systems, right? And that we have a lot of work to do.
Definitely. And I'm pretty sure me and you could talk hours on this credit, I would say credit crisis.
Yes, I agree.
My next question is kind of close to when we were talking about the educational styling, but a lot of what we know when it comes to our not just foster youth, but juvenile, homeless students and so forth. They're faced with many difficulties where they have to get IEPs and different things like that. And I don't know if you may know the answer to this. I'm hoping you do. What have you seen being with those school districts and those schools being receptive to giving a student an IEP?
So that's a really insightful question. And as someone with a deep special education background, what I can say is it's hard for me as a professional to step up and say, yes, every one of those kids who comes to child study should get the support they need through an individual education plan. However, Michael, what I think the bigger issue is we're talking about learning gaps. We're not necessarily really talking about a learning disability. Mm-hmm. So I would be I would be hesitant to rush through the very specific evaluation process to hurry and get that IEP in place. What I would rather see and recommend are remediation steps, and schools take the resources through the title money that they have and through state funds called 31A at-risk dollars, and use those kinds of programs that have been approved for their districts to support kids to really close some of those learning gaps. We do know in Michigan, there's roughly 12% of our student population is identified as a student with a specific learning disability. There are 13 different eligibility areas, but an SLD, so that's reading, math, phonics, so there are different areas within writing, spelling. So there are different areas within SLD, specific learning disability. We know through science and evidence-based research that of that 12%, really only 3 to 5% of those kids are truly disabled. Their learning issue does not necessarily come from a problem in their brain or the way that their brain processes information. Really has more to do with the instruction, lack of instruction, lack of attendance, discipline measures. So these reasons that kids are removed from education. Right now, we're in an education crisis across the board because we don't have teachers. We don't have staff. We don't have anybody in the chute to fill the spots. We have teachers retiring at a rate that we've never seen before, and nobody's behind us to step in and fill those. So to your question, do I see that there's an issue? Yes, there's an issue, but I'm not going to rush to say that we need to hurry and give a student experiencing foster care an IEP.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And kind of, rounding us off, and to this, so we've talked about like the high school and, secondary schooling, part. I want to get towards that transition part, okay, now after high school, and planning towards, that step. We know that the statistics around high school graduation with, foster youth hasn't been the greatest really ever. What difference have you seen, in our state with that and federally, in your work?
Well, I can't say it's good news, especially with the onset of the COVID virus and the pandemic and the restrictions that we've experienced. I have compiled some data summaries, and we have different subgroups. Foster is one, homeless, McKinney-Vento, migrant, English learners, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and students experiencing military life. So we have all of those subgroups. Foster youth graduate at the bottom of every one of those, including students with disabilities, every year. And unfortunately, with the onset of the pandemic, we have seen that our foster youth subgroup actually go farther back. This last year for 2021, foster youth graduated at a rate of 39.53. Compared, now all of the groups kind of declined a bit, including the statewide average, which came down almost 2% points. But in comparison, the statewide average is like 80.52 for 2021, and foster youth graduated at 39.53, and that's a 4-year cohort. So the closest to that would be our McKinney-Vento or homeless student population, but they were in the 50s. Students with a disability, gosh, they were almost 60%. So when you consider that, it's like, holy smokes, what do we do? How do we stabilize this? And one of the issues is, I mentioned before that we have a high turnover in our caseworkers. We have kind of a mismatch of systems. We have two giant systems that really don't partner as they should, and we're working toward. I mean, I couldn't have a better elbow partner in my DHHS work than Ian Rossi. We are aligned in everything we do. But it's, you've got a picture like moving granite mountains. You've got two mountains, both of them are granite, and you're trying to move them closer together. So, when you have that picture in your head, it kind of helps bring an understanding of like how the policies get in our own way. It's kind of like those unintended consequences we were talking about earlier. We set up the rules because the guidance says we have to, but how do those rules really interfere with our progress and with our support, which at the end of the day is really all that matters. So I can see areas where, as a state, we must improve. We must move toward legislation that allows highly mobile student populations to graduate on time and meeting the basic requirement. That is one step that I think would make a huge difference. And other protections. Like if a student was in 11th grade, they should be in 11th grade at the next school instead of a freshman. Michael, we had two students a couple of years ago who in one school year was in 5 different grades. They were in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, all in the same year. All in the same year, because they moved from school to school to school, and every school they went to assigned them to a different grade level. Now, how is that helpful?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I can't, my mind is just like circling. But as well, you've known me for a bit, education is one of the biggest things that I advocate, along with just, basic rights and essentials as far as resources for the foster care and juvenile justice community. Some of a couple of things I've been advocating on, I've been working with, different, representatives and stuff like that on post-secondary, support and eliminating barriers. But what it sounds like is, there needs to be legislation and secondary first to get them to
Right.
the post-secondary. I don't know. I can't believe that we, that everyone is thinking that, oh, we're good at that system. I can't believe that. I know, we probably know that there is issues and problems, at least I hope, in a legislative mind, like we know that that's there, and I'm hoping that, with everything they have to prioritize, and I get that and everything, but while we're in this stage of reform and change, I feel like this is something that needs to be on that radar.
Yes.
Because these populations are hurting. In my experience, I'm seeing people jump from, and I use this phrase, not really lightly, pipeline to one system to another system, and that other system isn't so great, because they either have dropped out or when given opportunity, because of just too much, like trying to maintain credits, foster home ain't great, so why even bother? Why even bother? I get the opportunity, I'm gonna run away. Now I'm 18, so now I'm living my life, and because, I didn't get my high school diploma, it's hard to get a job and all these different things, because now you know, um, people are requiring like associates for just basic jobs, you
Yep.
know. So it's only getting harder and harder. And then the other part of that, what I'm seeing, and I see this even at my own college that I'm at now, is that we have a lot of um, former foster youth that have became parents.
Mhm.
and luckily, we have a couple schools that have that. I forget what the specific name is, but they're helping parents become educated, at least to get their GED to be able to support their
Right.
kids. But then we're seeing that gap because if there's parents that can't help do the homework when they get home, education stops. And we're already hearing that. There's a crisis in the education system with teachers. So, they're doing all they can in the school, but if that don't translate to the homes, how it's not a roundabout circle. So there's many different things that, me and you could talk about. And I would love to continue this conversation with you, but time, it has
Yeah.
all time is get the
Time.
best of us. So
Mhm.
I would love to, have you on. I'm getting ready to end this season, but I would love to have you back on in season 2 to kind of get, deeper into these, conversations and also, work proactive with you on this journey towards change. Um, and I say that, I don't have a lot of restraints, and I know in those fields and in those departments, there's a lot of different restraints, and so I can be that that loud voice and
I would like.
advocating
I would love
serious.
to have you come in and be a
Uh,
live wire.
Definitely. So I would love to be able to support you in my own story of going to 21 different high schools and just helping that passage translate better, and what you're saying to whoever it may be. So just know that you can reach out to me and connect with me at any time. But also, to the listeners, thank you guys for being able to listen. I'm sure you guys, especially Michiganders, listen to this, got a lot of different knowledge today. And for the foster parents too, foster adoptive parents, I'm pretty sure you got a little bit of knowledge too, because I understand. And there's a lot of frustration there with school systems and being a foster parent or adoptive parents, and trying to provide the best care for the youth that you're taking care of. So there's a lot we can tap into, and I look forward to tapping into it in a different conversation. But I appreciate you being on. I'm so honored to be able to have this conversation with you. Truly, you're a phenomenal woman. You guys don't know, but like, it was, people like yourself and my NYY coordinator, Whitney Johnson and
Mhm.
Carrie Ward and Maddie Day, like, that pushed me to that pathway of getting past high school. Because
Mhm.
as I speak to that story of being sick and tired, I was that student because I went to so many different schools, and I didn't, because I went to so many different schools, I didn't have a problem of retaining the knowledge. And that's more so what I'm learning now in college now. Don't have a problem of retaining the knowledge. That's not it. What happened was, when moving around so much, I eventually created behavior just because I was tired. I was like, I'm not gonna be here long anyway.
Right.
So I didn't take school serious. By the time I did take school serious, there was a lot of different things that I did not know yet. And because like No Child Left Behind and different things like that, I got passed up. And next thing you know, I'm in my senior year, not knowing my multiplication and stuff like that. And I had to learn all of those things to get to graduate. And I did. I graduated with a 4.0 GPA, and
Congratulations.
for that semester, not the overall though, not the overall.
Okay.
My GPA overall was, I don't know what it was, but I did like when I got it together, I did do well and excel well, and so forth. And even in college, I'm finding that out too, and a lot of times in my own experience, um, it's not so much of a learning disability, it's just, you have to slow yourself down,
Yes.
and pace, and that's what I'm learning in college, is that I can't take like 6 or 7 different classes. That's not it. Like, some people can do that, I have to like, look, these is like 3 or 2 classes I can take this semester.
Mhm.
This is what I'm going to do. And I can dedicate this amount of time to be able to do that. So, and that's a little bit of my own experience. Do you have any last thoughts or comments, Kathleen?
Yes, I do. And I appreciate, Michael, first of all, thank you for welcoming me today and including this and my voice in your work and in your mission. What I hope is that youth and foster families feel empowered to advocate for what's best for the youth, not what's best for adults, not what's best for adults at schools, but what's best for the youth. And if you need help from the state level, please reach out to me. My last name is spelled Hoehne and the first initial K. So if you can find Kathleen Hoehne or Hoehne K at michigan.gov, you've got me, and I will do everything I can. I can't promise I can solve it all, but I can at least lean into what is in the best interest for that child. And if we could utilize some of the electronic tools that we have that are underutilized at this point in really tracking a youth's credits and their credit accumulation, so that if they do have to move schools, they've got it right there in their pocket, right in their phone, so that they're not having to wait for school records to try to find the right class. Advocate, advocate, advocate. And first of all, last but most importantly, love yourself. Give yourself the space that you need to recognize that 1 or 2 classes or maybe 3 is it. We all have limitations. Every human being, especially in this crazy world we live in, respect that. Give yourself that space and that grace, and know that every tomorrow is another chance. It really is. It's a second chance to give it another try. Even if you're tired today, tomorrow's another day.
Definitely. Thank you. Such powerful words. Yeah, I, I appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you and connecting with you on some of the things that you're working on, but also to have you back, potentially for season 2, and to be able to further this conversation and keep this conversation going, because that's one of the biggest things, as well as, I'm like, we got to talk about it. It's time that we do better,
It is.
And everything like that. So you guys, I say this all the time. This is my little spiel. COVID is out there. It is here. Please take care of yourself. If you're thinking about getting vaccinated, do your research, get it done. No procrastination. If you're not, I respect it, not going to dive into it, and so forth, but please make sure that you're taking the precautions, wearing a mask, washing your hands, sanitizing, to just take care of your village, because if you're taking care of your individual village and yourself, you're taking care of the big village we call the United States and Earth and the whole globe and everything like that. So just please do what you can, so we all can do what we can to be able to support each other and to stay healthy. Thank you guys for listening. I look forward to bringing you guys more episodes. And you guys have a good night, good morning, good evening, good whenever you're listening to this. And this has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. Thank you.